Welcome to the 10th edition of the Signs of the Times and our last presentation. We have been looking at 6 agendas so far, and I did promise you that we would have one more, and that one is number 7, the Catholic agenda. We've been talking about the beast being ruled by Satan through the beast, and the beast ruling the nations of the earth, so there definitely is a Catholic agenda. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Malachi Martin. This little comment about him is taken from the dust jacket of one of his books. He is an eminent theologian, expert on the Roman Catholic Church, and former Jesuit and professor at the Vatican Pontifical Biblical Institute. Is the author of the bestsellers The Jesuits, The Final Conclave, and Hostage to the Devil. He is an insider's insider, and he is a very informative man who reveals much about the Catholic agenda. He wrote a book about the Jesuits. He was a Jesuit himself. He left under strange circumstances. He was released from his vows, apparently. But he's been a prolific author about all things Catholic. And in this book about the Jesuits, he wrote, "Never before in the course of the world's history had such a society appeared. The old Roman Senate itself did not lay schemes for world dominion with greater certainty of success." You know, many books have been written about the Jesuits. They are one of the favorite topics of many people, and they are people who are definitely players on the international scheme of things, on the international stage. They have been for ever since their inception. They're kind of like the Pope's shock troops, or his special forces, his commandos, if you like. Napoleon had an interesting comment about them. He said they're not a religious order, they are a military order. They have a general over them, and they act like the military secret forces of the Vatican. So let me carry on with another book that Malachi Martin wrote, and this is quite an amazing book. It's called The Keys of This Blood, and the subtitle of the book is The Struggle for World Dominion Between Pope John Paul II, Mikhail Gorbachev, and the Capitalist West. This is the last book that Malachi Martin wrote just before his death, and you can tell that he wrote it in the time of John Paul II and Mikhail Gorbachev. And what he's saying here is that there is a three-way tug, or a three-way competition for who's going to rule in the first New World Order, or the one world government of the earth. Who's going to control it? And at that time, Mikhail Gorbachev was a player. He was the president of the USSR. But they have come to a sticky end, and there's only the Pope and the Capitalist West left. Now, he says that they are in competition, whereas in actual fact, they are allies. He may see them as competition, but the scriptures tell us, and Bible prophecy tell us, they are allies. Nevertheless, what he has to say in this book is extremely revealing. So let's read what he says on the very first page. "Willing or not, ready or not, we are all involved in an all-out, no-holds-barred, three-way global competition. Most of us are not competitors, however. We are the stakes." In other words, the competition is over us. "For the competition is about who will establish the first one world government, or the world system of government that has ever existed in the society of nations. Those of us who are under 70 will see at least the basic structures of the new world government installed." And carrying on, he says, "Those of us under 40 will surely live under its legislative, executive, and judiciary authority and control. Indeed, the three rivals themselves and many people besides speak about this new world order not as something around a distant corner of time, but something that is imminent. Well, it's only imminent under certain conditions. This is why I always end these presentations by trying to emphasize the fact that God is in control, and He is. These people can only do what God allows them to do. But the prophecies do tell us that they will succeed in putting a one world government in place, and it will be under the control of the Pope. So this is how we agree with Malachi Martin, because he says that the Pope will be the winner. So how is he going to be the winner? Well, he says in chapter 15 and 16, he identifies 10 opposition groups. And these groups have to be dealt to. They have to be either assimilated, or they have to be bought off, or they have to be destroyed. They have to be dealt to in some way, shape or form. Can you imagine who the first group is? Think about what's happening in the world today. Think about what the signs of the times are telling you. Think about where the wars and the strife are. And that should give you an indication of who the first group is. And the first group is Islam. Islam is under attack today in many, many areas, and we are told that they are the ones who are attacking us. They are the enemy, and they are. There's no reason. There's no reason to believe that they are not our enemies, because they understand that we are attacking them. So yes, Islam is the group that is going to be defeated first, and let's remind ourselves about the modus operandi of the papacy. The kingdom of this bold little king will grow stronger and stronger. He will control powerful nations who will wield the sword for him. America is the nation that is under the control of the papacy, that is wielding the sword for the papacy at this time in history in the Middle East and around the world. They are the ones who are under the papacy's control. And we could talk several programs about how the papacy runs the political system in Washington, D.C. And that would be interesting, but we don't have time to look at that. But yes, the Roman Catholic Church is very powerful in America, and we are seeing this played out by their control of the sword of America, if you like, and it's being wielded in the Middle East and around the world on behalf of the papacy. Remember what the prophecy said. He will have great power, and he will work on behalf of the first beast. And remember that Pio Lagi, he said, we've had 2,000 years experience of this. 2,000 experience of what? 2,000 years of experience of working through nations to achieve the papacy's goals. This has happened historically. Spain used to be the sword of the church. France was the sword of the church in different times of history. Now it's America. Let's look at how this works out in practice. You remember the Arab Springs? There was great talk about the Arab Springs in the news media not so long ago. And so let's look at what happened in Egypt and the first Arab Spring. The Arab Spring produced this man, Muhammad Morsi, who is a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. And when the Arab Spring was over, he was in control. He was in power. And what he did was he wanted to bring in an Islamic constitution. Now, this may seem a bit strange, that because the Muslim Brotherhood has been generally regarded as a terrorist organization, and sometimes it's on the terror list and sometimes it's not, but mostly it is. And here we have a president elected to power in Egypt after the so-called Arab Spring, which is going to give the Egyptians freedom and democracy, and here he comes imposing an Islamic constitution. Well, the Egyptian people smelled a rat, and so they had a second Arab Spring, Arab Spring 2.0, and this time they threw Mohammed Morsi out, and the military took over. And during the demonstrations against his regime, because they didn't want an Islamic constitution, but America did. You've got to understand that America does not like nationalist governments. They do not like governments that stand up and represent their people. They want puppet states that will work for the interests of the empire. So here you see the people of Egypt waking up to what's going on. And look what they say. Wake up, America. Look at this. Wake up, America. Obama backs fascist regime in Egypt. Because that's what the Muslim Brotherhood is. They're fascists. Look at this one. Stop the Christian genocide in Egypt. 10% of Egyptians are Coptic Christians. And so even when this regime wasn't, the Muslim Brotherhood was in power, Christians were losing their lives. And America supports this regime. So there's another one here that says, from Tahrir Square to the US media and Muslim Brotherhood. In other words, he's saying Tahrir Square was a symbol of freedom. It was a symbol of people desiring freedom and democracy. But what did they get? They got the Muslim Brotherhood instead. Obama and Patterson support terrorism in Egypt. Patterson is the American ambassador to Egypt. Obama supports terrorism. Barack Hussein Obama, you killed the Arab Spring. They killed it by putting this regime in power, this US puppet regime. Look what this woman says. History will record that the first US African-American president led Egypt to a civil war by supporting a bunch of highly incompetent terrorists. Because the Muslim Brotherhood has always been considered a terrorist organization. So you see, these people, these average Egyptian people, they understand what's going on, but we don't, because we're not allowed to see these kind of signs on our TV news. Look at this one. We don't negotiate with terrorists, we finance them. That's what that woman is accusing Obama of. She's accusing America of financing the terrorists that they're fighting against. This one, Al-Qaeda is the Muslim Brotherhood's military wing. Whoa. And here we have a Muslim Brotherhood regime in Egypt, and this man is accusing the Muslim Brotherhood of having a military wing, which is Al-Qaeda. And a lot of people are beginning to see this. Here's Al-Qaeda under the cloak of a wolf in sheep's clothing. And Obama's saying, don't take the jacket off yet, bro. We don't want the people to know this. So, let's now look at Syria. The conflict begins in Syria. And here you have the Wahhabis. And I would like to share with you a report from the Defense Intelligence Agency. Now, that's the military intelligence agency of the Pentagon. And they are responsible for providing intelligence to the government and to the military. Now, this is a document which was retrieved through America has laws where you can request special documents under freedom of access. And for some reason, this document was released. And it looks like this. It doesn't have a heading. This is the first page on the document. All very sort of strange, but I just thought I'd show you because it doesn't have a heading. Now, it does say that, you see what it says here? The Salafist, this section here, the Salafist and Muslim Brotherhood. By the way, the Salafists, remember, that's another word for Wahhabis. The Salafist and Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda in Iraq, that's what IQI means, are the major forces driving the insurgency in Syria. I don't know whether you remember it, but the US government always used to try and say, we are only supporting moderate terrorists, or the moderate anti-Assad groups. But no, there's never been such a a force, as a moderate anti-Assad. These people are jihadis, they are Wahhabis. Now, part of this document says, on the other hand, up here, you see, I've put it up here. This is actually in the document, but I've put it up here. On the other hand, opposition forces are trying to control the eastern areas. That's the eastern areas of Syria. The Gulf states and Turkey are supporting these efforts. Okay? And that's, you see, first of all, the document says that the people who are active are the Wahhabis, the Muslim Brotherhood, and Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and the Gulf states and Turkey are supporting these efforts. So they also say, if the situation unravels, there is the possibility of establishing a declared or undeclared Salafist, that's Wahhabi, principality in eastern Syria, and this is exactly what the supporting powers want. In other words, they want a terrorist Wahhabi control of eastern Syria. And that's what they are working for. And the people who are working for this are Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Qatar. They are the main supporters of these people. So here you see, this is in the black there, the Islamic State's claimed caliphate. You may remember they established their own caliphate, which means a Muslim ruling area. And it says, this document says, this is exactly what Qatar, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia wanted. So you see, we're not being told the full story when it comes to the Middle East. We are told that we're in there fighting for freedom and democracy and all the rest of it. That's just spin. They are in there fighting to establish their own agendas, and in the background all the time is the Catholic Church looking on as the Muslims, the Islamists, destroy each other. Now, isn't that a wonderful way to obtain supremacy over an enemy? If you get the enemy to fight each other. And that's exactly what's going on in the Middle East. You remember the poison gas attack that was done against, supposedly the Assad regime did it to their own people. This is what happened on Syria 21st, in Syria, August 21st, 2013. But the true story of the gas attack against the civilian population comes out when the UN sent an investigator to find out what really happened. And this woman's name is Del Ponte. And by the way, she's been a very good investigator for the UN in the past. And she's been in, for example, in Bosnia when those terrible things were going on there. So she's got a lot of experience. Anyway, she says that after investigating it, she says that the Syrian rebels were the ones who were responsible, and they were trying to blame it on Assad. Now, this article here says that the US backed this plan to launch chemical weapons attacks on Syria and blame it on Assad's regime. Look what it says down here. Obama issued, no, it says the idea here, the idea is approved by Washington. So they knew that it was a false, this kind of attack is called a false flag attack, where you do something and blame it on somebody else. And it's something that governments use all the time. Hitler used it often. And this was just a typical false flag. And Washington knew it was a false flag, but nevertheless they go along with it and they blame the Syrian regime, when in actual fact it was the jihadis. Now the reason why Syria hasn't fallen over yet is because of the intervention of Putin. He actually went to the Syrian government and said, look, get rid of all your chemical weapons, and then the Americans will have no excuse to attack you. And he did. Assad got rid of all of his weapons, and Putin has been involved heavily with defending Syria, and that's one of the reasons why Syria hasn't fallen over yet. So you see, the Syrians are very dependent on Russia, and they are resisting the empire, and they've been successful so far. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but it's still going on. It started in 2011, and we're now 4 years later. So it's been a terrible conflict, and many people are suffering. That's why all the refugees are fleeing to Europe. That's why you hear about them drowning in the Mediterranean. This is all part of this conflict. But anyway, so the establishment, the empire, is not happy with Putin and also with China, because China has been indirectly supporting Syria as well. So look what our friend Clinton says, this candidate for presidency in America. She says, she's telling a group called the Friends of Syria, which are an opposition group to Assad, Russia and China will pay the price. Wow. So the empire is now angry with Russia and China. Well, they were never friends to start with, but now they're even more angry because of their interference in the Middle East and Syria in particular. So the scene now moves to Ukraine. You may remember recently there's been all sorts of ruckus and turmoil in this part of the world. And here we have the Ukrainian president, Viktor Yanukovych, who was democratically elected. And then the issue came up about whether Ukraine would join the EU or not. And this dispute is over the geopolitical significance of the Ukraine. If the EU wins, Russia will have the EU and NATO right on its border. And Russia will really not like that and will do anything to stop it happening. If we could use an analogy for a minute, you think about what would happen if a foreign country like Russia or China put missiles into Mexico and aimed them at the heart of the USA. Do you think America would be happy about that? Do you think America might do something about that? Of course they would. They wouldn't allow that for an instance. So, I mean, do you remember when Russia tried to do it in Cuba and that produced the Cuban crisis? America would never allow a foreign hostile nation to place missiles on its border. But this is exactly what Russia is faced with. This is what America expects Russia to put up with. But Russia will not allow that. That's why we have a crisis at the moment in Ukraine. So Yanukovych refuses to join the European Union and the protests start. What happened was when Yanukovych read the fine print of the agreement that he was supposed to sign with the EU, he said, no thanks, I can get a better deal from Russia. Well, that wasn't allowed. And when he said no to joining the EU, that's when all hell broke loose. Now, let me just explain to you what an agent provocateur is, because this is the person who initiates the coups. Down below here it says an agent provocateur is French for inciting agent, is an undercover agent who acts to entice another person to commit an illegal or rash act or falsely implicate them in partaking in an illegal act. And up the top there it says, we are agent provocateurs. We are hired by your government or police force to create violence at a peaceful protest to give the police justifiable cause to use force. So, here you have agent provocateurs in action in Ukraine. This is what we call the Maidan protests, because it took place on the Maidan Square in the capital city of Kiev. This is agent provocateurs in action. And once again, agent provocateurs in action. What they are trying to do is to provoke the police to attack them. And then they can accuse the police of brutality, etc. And that's how coups are put in place, or how they occur. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Victoria Nuland, who is her official title is Assistant Secretary of State for Europe and Eurasian Affairs. This is the woman who oversaw the coup against the democratically elected government of Yanukovych. And he wanted to have nothing to do with the EU. He wanted to cozy up to Russia. Well, that was not allowed, because remember what Clinton said? Russia has to be punished. So this is Russia's punishment in process here. This is the ambassador, the American ambassador to the Ukraine, and he is Newland's co-conspirator in the coup. And here they are together with their security detail in the capital city of Kiev. Now, I'd like to play for you a phone call. It's not only the Americans that can hack phone calls, other people can hack phone calls too, and I'd like you to listen to a phone call between these two as they conspire together to bring about the coup in the Ukraine. So we're going to pause here and listen to what Newland and Pratt say to each other.
What do you think?
I think we're in play.
Good. So I don't think Cleach should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea. I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Cleach and Tony Book on the outside. I talked to Jeff Feltman this morning. He had a new name for the UN guy, Robert Seri. He's now gotten both Seri and Ban Ki-moon to agree that Seri could come in Monday or Tuesday. So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it.
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Now, it's obvious that from the phone call that you just heard that these two are planning and plotting a new regime in the Ukraine. And here they are meeting with the co-conspirators that they have elevated to regime status. These are the ones they have chosen to lead the new regime. So this is Newland meeting with Ola Tanebuk, Arseny Yatsenyuk, that's the one that Newland calls Yats, and Vitaly Klitschko, who used to be a boxing champion. And they are sitting down together to organize the new regime which will take over in Kiev. And here they are haggling with one another about who's going to do what. In actual fact, Klitschko there on the left, he was actually told, you go back to being the mayor of Kiev. And Yats here on the right, he's the chosen one who's going to be the prime minister in the new regime. Now, there's something you need to understand about Ukraine. It's actually a country which is kind of split in two. And on the east, you have the Russian-speaking majority, and they are pro-Russian, of course. And on the the west side, you have the Ukrainian-speaking majority, and they are pro-Western. So it's kind of like a country divided in half, but there are more divisions. What is interesting about the West is that it's also the Nazi side of the Ukraine, and I'll explain why it's the Nazi side in a moment. But one thing we also need to understand, it's also the side of the country that is Catholic. The Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church is the dominant church in this part of the West. Look what it says here. Currently, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church predominates in 3 western oblasts. That means regions or provinces of Ukraine, including about half the population of Lviv, which is the dominant city in the west, but constitutes a small minority elsewhere in the country. So you see, the Catholic population of Ukraine is concentrated in this part of the western part of Ukraine, and it's also the Nazi part of the Ukraine, and there's a reason for that, and I'll explain that also. Now, this part of the western Ukrainian is called Galicia. Galicia used to be a separate country, but now it's divided in two. Half of it's in Poland and half of it in Ukraine. This is the 3 oblasts, or in the blue there on the left, this is the 3 oblasts or provinces which make up Galicia in the Ukraine. And this is where the Catholics live. Now, this is where a Nazi division, an SS Nazi division, was raised in order to help the Germans fight in the east. And if you look down here, I'll just point out a few things. Down here it says, in the SS Division Galician for a free homeland. And this part here says Ukraine volunteers, for Ukraine volunteers. So this is where they raised up in the West, in this Catholic part of Ukraine. It was only, that's why they called it the Galician Division, because it came from Galicia. And these people who fought for the Nazis, about 60,000 strong, they were Catholics. And they attacked their own Ukrainian neighbors because there was a very active partisan group who were actually supporting the Russians. And these people in this division were used to combat the partisans. In other words, they were fighting against their own people. And you can see up here the Nazi flag. You can see here the name Galician as they march through the streets. The Nazi flag is closely associated with this symbol here, which is the logo of the Galician Division. And I'll show you a few more. Look what we have here. Here's Hitler, and here's the logo of the Galician Division. Here's a soldier with the Galician Division sign down here as well, and here as well, all over the place. It's very prominent. And here you have the people marching in the streets supporting the Nazis. Here you have the Wolfsangel, which is the symbol of the SS. Here you have the Galician Division symbol. And down here you have a modern parade through the same area. They're all carrying the same symbol. And yet again, you have another one. This is very prominent still today, because these people admire the Galician Division. They are in full support of the Nazi ideology. They're also Catholic. Now, here you have Stefan Bandera. He is the man who was chiefly responsible for organizing the Galician Division for the Nazis. And you can see how he's honored in Ukraine today. He's on a stamp. Here he has a statue. And here they have parades through the street carrying his picture. And here you have a Catholic priest. So, very prominent. He's still a hero in the Ukraine with some Ukrainians today. And he was a Nazi collaborator. And the Galician Division committed horrendous atrocities against their own people and against other people. And here you can see during the demonstrations in during the coup against the democratically elected government of the Ukraine, they carried pictures of Stefan Bandera everywhere. I just want to tell you first, though, before I show you some more pictures, I want to tell you first what happened to the Galician Division after the Second World War. As the Soviets were pressing westward, the Galician Division retreated westward. They ended up in a prison of war camp in Italy. And the policy was that all such people, and this was an official agreement between the Allies, between America and Britain and Russia, that all such people who originated from the East would be returned to the East, whether they wanted to go or not. So that's the official policy. The Galician Division was to go back to Ukraine, where obviously they would be punished, probably with death, by the Soviet Union. Now, many hundreds of thousands of Eastern Europeans, Russians, were forcibly, and I mean forcibly, sent back to the East in accordance with this agreement. And this was considered a vital issue to keep Uncle Joe, Stalin, happy. So they were forced back, but this never happened to the Galician Division. The Pope intervened on their behalf, and they were the only ones who escaped they were allowed to go and settle in England, and the rest of them went to settle in Canada. They all escaped the justice that they deserved. They were committing atrocities. They were committing war crimes. There's no question about it. Anybody who wants to investigate this can investigate it for themselves. But they got off. They got off because they were Catholic and they were promoted by the Pope. So that's the history of the Galatian. But here you have the man who's responsible. Up here on the screen here, you have this man who's responsible for forming the Galatian SS division, and he's still a hero in Ukraine today. Look, everywhere you see these people demonstrating against the democratically elected government, you see Stefan Bandera. They carry him around like a saint. Everywhere you see him. Everywhere. That's when they occupied Kiev's town hall, and he is a Roman Catholic terrorist. I'm sorry, you can't call him anything else, but he's a hero. We are the Banderites. This is from one of these, a website which these people have. They call themselves the Banderites after Stefan Bandera. We are coming. We are going into the wide world from the depths of our glorious nation with God in our hearts and a sword by our side. That is typical Catholicism, my friends. I'm very sorry. But when the Catholics do get an opportunity to act like this, they will act like this. And I know it may sound shocking and even uncivilized. We're supposed to live in a civilized era, but no, the Catholic Church used to have control of the world and they want it back. And they're working hard to get it. Do you remember Pope Paul said, Pope Paul II, he said, we are building up the church again in the world. And this is how they do it. I'm serious. They use violence. Okay? Now, the right sector is a Ukrainian nationalist political party that originated in November 2013 as a paramilitary confederation at the Euromaidan protests in Kiev, where its street fighters led counterattacks against riot police. These people are Nazis. Look, this is the right sector Azov battalion, proudly showing the Nazi insignia. They have Nazi insignias on their helmets. They have Nazi insignias, propaganda all over the parts of Ukraine that they control. That's Stefan Bandera again there. This is Ole Tanibuk, leader of the Svoboda Party. It was formerly known as the Social Nationalist Party, the Social National Party of Ukraine. Now that sounds just a bit too Nazi, because that's what the Nazi Party used to call itself, the National Socialist Party of Germany. That's where you get the word Nazi from. And so he was advised to change the name to Svoboda Party, which means Freedom Party. Okay, but you can see what he stands for. He comes from Lviv, which is the capital Catholic city in the West. He started his political career as a member of the Lviv National Regional Council. Here he is in consultation with Victoria Nuland, the one who is planning the coup, and he is part of the new government. Nazi Party. Here is a comment from a Ukrainian blogger, somebody on the streets, and he has written what he has seen and told us what he's seen. The Western and Ukrainian Uniate Church, that's another name for the Catholic Church, okay? The Western Ukrainian, notice he's very clear where it comes from, the West Ukraine. Uniate Church is one of the most effective instruments in the hands of neo-Nazis for recruiting and brainwashing people. It actively participated in the revolution in Kiev. Many of these radicals with this fake ideology followed the priests of the Uniate Church that was giving them a blessing and encouraging them to fight for freedom. And in fact, these priests came to Kiev along with the extremists. And he says, here is a priest, down here, over here, here is a priest, Catholic priest, behind the radicals who are giving a hate speech. So people on the ground have observed the Catholic Church in action. Now, that shouldn't surprise us because the Catholic Church has always supported Nazism. This is a man who is quoting from Catholic sources, and he says, today, which was, he's talking about 1939, Rome considers the fascist regime the nearest to its dogmas and interests. We have not merely the Reverend Jesuit Father Coghlan praising Mussolini's Italy as a Christian democracy, but Civilita Catholica, house organ of the Jesuits, says quite frankly, fascism is the regime that corresponds most closely to the concepts of the Church of Rome. And there's no question about it. There are many, many sources that could be quoted to support the fact that the Catholic Church is definitely a fascist organization, and they support fascism, Nazism, dictatorship wherever they can. That's their modus operandi. They were supporters of Hitler and Mussolini during the Second World War, but they don't talk about it so much anymore because that was defeated. But when the time is right, we will find again that the Catholic Church is behind fascism and Nazism. So, war breaks out in the East because the ethnic Russians refuse to be ruled by the Nazi regime in Kiev. You see, the people in the East, their grandfathers and their fathers fought the same people from the West during the Second World War. They know what's going on. They know what they're faced with, and they're simply not going to knuckle under and be ruled by these people. So that's why they took up arms, and in their own defense, really, because these Nazis are Russian-hating people. So, will the Catholic Church rule the world? We're coming to the end of our last presentation, and we need to look at some of the issues here. Now, what George Orwell tells us in his book 1984, which is kind of like what we're living through now, he says the war is not meant to be won, it is meant to be continuous. And the reason it's meant to be continuous is that this means that the people can be galvanized to act in a certain way because there's always a war going on. When there's a war going on, people feel insecure and they will follow their leaders and they will do what is required of them. But secondly, when there's a continuous war, that means that there's continuous destruction. And the war will go on in the Middle East until the Islamists are destroyed, or at least until they knuckle down and bow down and worship the Pope. That's why the war in the Middle East is going on at the moment, and it will continue to go on until the Catholic agenda has achieved its goals. And then they will move on to the second group that is on the list that Malachi Martin gave us. And the first people on that list are Seventh-day Adventists, along with other people, groups, churches who believe in the Bible. They are the second group to be removed and eliminated. So, prophecy tells us all the world wondered after the beast. Will the Catholic Church rule the world? Well, it's looking that way if all the world is admiring the beast, and they not only admiring him, they're worshipping the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast and who is able to make war against him? Notice what it says. They cannot make war against him. Militarily, he's impregnable. Isn't that interesting? Because he obviously has nations working for him. And he has the most powerful nation on earth at the moment working for him. Now, let's just review from Daniel to Revelation. Here we have the Roman Catholic system portrayed as church and state. That's what that actually is telling us. Then we move on to the Roman Catholic system as a beast. And then we move on to it as a little horn. And that's where it comes to power as a religio-political system. And then it moves on to tell us about how the papacy is ruling through those horns, the crowns on its head, representing rulership, and it's ruling through those horns, okay? And then it moves on to the last repetition of the Roman Catholic system, and we have a woman riding on the beast. It's the same beast, my friends, but now we have a woman riding on it. And what that is simply in accordance with the principle of repeat and enlarge. And I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-coloured beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, it says it has 7 heads and 10 horns, and over on the left here, this beast has 7 heads and 10 horns too. So it's the same beast, it now has a woman on it, and that is in accordance with repeat and enlarge. And it says it has, the beast has full of names of blasphemy. Well, that's what we were told here. We were told exactly the same thing. 4 times it mentions that this beast is involved in blasphemy. So you see, this is simply a repetition and enlargement. The woman riding the beast is a church. She is the accumulated power of paganism. Notice that she has no crowns, though. Upon his head, the beast has no crowns with the woman sitting on her. And the reason for that is that she has ceased ruling. Her ruling days are over, because this is the judgment. This is the judgment of the great whore that sits on the beast. Now, the reason why we haven't seen her before is simply because of what I've been trying to tell you all the time. We haven't seen her before because her hand has always been concealed. Once again, let's go over it. We have Satan. He gives his power. Satan gives his power to the beast. Therefore, we can't see Satan's hand. Then the beast gives his power to the nations, and the nations work on the beast's behalf, or the Catholic Church's behalf, and we don't see her hand. That's why we can't see the woman sitting on the beast. You understand? She's hidden. But now in the last days, in the very last days, we will begin to see her. People will wake up and begin to understand that there is a woman sitting on the beast and she's directing the beast. If she's riding the beast, that means she's directing it, right? So, what do we know about this woman? And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. She's got daughters. Wow. And she's responsible for all the abominations of the earth. Now, this is in keeping with what we were told in Daniel. Remember how Daniel was told that these beasts live on in the last beast? Daniel prophesied it and John saw it. The Babylonian religion or paganism surviving and flourishing to the end of time. It starts with Babylon, and the spirit of Babylon passes into Medo-Persia. That passes into Greece, and that passes into the Rome, and then that passes into the papal system of Rome. That's what the prophecies are telling us. Now, is the Roman Catholic Church infected with paganism? Well, let a cardinal tell us the truth about this. You know, the Catholic Church is quite open sometimes about what it's all about, and this cardinal has told us how paganism is part of the Catholic Church. This is what he says. Confiding then in the power of Christianity to resist the infection of evil and to transmute the very instruments and appendages of demon worship to an evangelical use, the rulers of the Church from early times were prepared, should the occasion arise, to adopt, to imitate, or sanction the existing rites and customs of the populace, as well as the philosophy of the educated classes. We are told in various ways by Eusebius, he's an historian who lived at that time, that Constantine, he was the first Roman emperor to become a Christian, in order to recommend the new religion to the heathen, transferred into it the outward ornaments to which they had been accustomed in their own. It is not necessary to go into a subject which the diligence of Protestant writers has made familiar to most of us. Well, unfortunately, it's not familiar to most of us anymore. Then he goes on to say what came in from paganism into the church. The use of temples, and these dedicated to particular saints and ornamented on occasions with branches of trees, incense, lamps and candles, votive offerings, on recovery from illness, holy water asylums, holy days and seasons, use of calendars, processions, blessings on the fields, sacerdotal vestments, the tonsure and the ring in marriage, turning to the east, images at a later date, perhaps the ecclesiastical chant and the Kyrie eleison are all of pagan origin and sanctified by their adoption into the church. Basically, what he's saying here is that yes, we took everything from paganism, but it's okay because as it came into the church, we blessed it and we made it Catholic. And now it's become part of us. And my friends, this is what prophecy is telling us. The Roman Catholic Church is simply an extension of paganism. Notice what it says also. It says holy days were one of the things that they brought in from paganism, and that's exactly what Sunday is. It's the day of the sun. That's when the pagans worship the sun, and that's why we have Sunday today. Now, this woman, which is really a picture of the Catholic Church, she sits and reigns everywhere on everything. Look, she sits upon the scarlet-coloured beast. That's obvious. The prophecies tell us that she sits upon the heads of the beast. She sits upon many waters. She sits upon the mountains. She reigns over the kings of the earth. She reigns over the merchants of the earth. And that's something we haven't even talked about. The Vatican, the Catholic Church has huge economic interests. And actually she reigns over the economic interests of the earth. The merchants of the earth are called her merchants. Okay? She controls everyone and everything through fornication and sorcery, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have made men drunk with the wine of her fornication. You know, that's not talking about literal fornication, it's talking about spiritual fornication. You see, it's talking about the amalgamating of church and state. This is something which is contrary to Scripture. Jesus said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and render unto God what is God's. And the two things were never meant to be put together. Jesus said you cannot serve two masters. Okay? If you put the two together, the one will corrupt the other. And that's why the church was always planned. It was God's intention that the church would remain separate and never be caught up with the state. Look what else it says. For by thy sorcery were all nations deceived. By thy sorcery. That's an interesting word in the Greek. The Greek word for sorcery is pharmakia, from which we get the term pharmaceutical from. Well, what it means that she is able to deceive people through things like witchcraft and things that are dealing with the dark side, and that's how she controls the nations. But I also should have explained drunk with the wine of her fornication. That doesn't mean drinking literally either. It means drinking the doctrine of the church. It means people accept what the church is telling them and they are made drunk, spiritually drunk. And when you're drunk, you can't understand very much. You can't understand clearly. But that's what the people of the earth are. They are drunk and with false doctrine. They can't think clearly. That's why it's so important to give people the facts, the right information, so that they can think clearly and make the right decisions. What that scripture is telling us is people are unable to do that. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. Now, it's interesting that that talks about 10 kings, because there is an organization called the Club of Rome, and they have divided the whole earth up into 10 regions, and they actually call it in their documents, they call them kingdoms, which is interesting. We are in kingdom number 4, and these regions, you can see them coming into being. The European Union, for example, is a model for the rest of these unions. There is a North American Union sort of in the wings, and there's an African Union, And these sort of things are all being talked about at the moment. And when they form these 10 regions, then they will be able to form a world government over all the regions. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These 10 regions, these 10 kingdoms have one mind, and they are going to give their strength unto the beast, it says. So is the Catholic Church going to rule? Yes, according to the prophecies it is. They have all the nations of the earth, these 10 regions, will give their power and one mind to the beast. This is an official EU poster. You can see that they're rebuilding the Tower of Babel. You see the crane here. That's a sign that the temple is the Tower of Babel is under construction. Do you remember that God threw down the original Tower of Babel, and these people are building it up again? It says here, Europe, many tongues, one voice. God broke up the Tower of Babel and by confusing the tongues. And what they're saying here is, yeah, the tongues are still confused, but we're going to make it into one voice. And by the way, these stars here, these are pentagrams. These are satanic stars. So, interesting poster, but it does indicate a little bit how these people have one mind. And by the way, the EU is a Catholic project. Won't go into that right now. But how is the Pope going to rule the world? Well, he's on his way. Look, this was a policy, an encyclical, which was just recently released. It was released on the 20th of June this year. And in this document, the Pope calls for a new global political authority. And the reason he's giving here is that if we don't have a world authority, we're all going to die because of global change, global climate change and all these threats which are threatening the earth at the moment. And so what he's doing here, he's galvanizing the support of the environmental movement to support him in his efforts to put this global authority in place. And most environmental inclined people will agree with him and will support him without knowing what's really going on. And Obama is a fan. He calls for the world leaders to heed what the Pope says. And here he's saying, down the bottom here, he says, I welcome His Holiness Pope Francis encyclical and deeply admire the Pope's decision to make the case, clearly, powerfully, and with a full moral authority of his position. And this is something which is stressed over and again, the Pope's great moral authority for action on global climate change. You see, the Pope is looked upon as the great moral example for the world. And to what end are they going to create this one world government? Well, it says, these shall make war with the Lamb. They're going to destroy the last group of people who oppose the satanic agenda, because that's what it is really. Look what it says here. And the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. The last agenda of all is to destroy God's people. That's what all this effort is for. It's to put in place a world government that can identify and eliminate all of God's people. But the conspiracy against Christ and his people will be defeated, because it says, these shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. So, friends, join the winning team, because even though it may look that the Pope, and with all his supporters and all his horns and all his economic powers behind him, that he's going to succeed, it's only going to look as if he's going to succeed, because in the last moment the Lamb shall overcome them all. And that's what happens when Jesus returns. So my friends, you want to be on the winning side when that happens. You don't want to be confused about this, and you don't want to join the wrong team. That's why Jesus is saying, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. I've told you before that the plagues that are going to fall on Babylon. They're going to fall on the Roman Catholic system. They're going to fall on the Roman Catholic system's supporters. And so again, you don't want to be on the wrong side. Now, there are many things that I have left out of these presentations. There's much more in prophecies. There's much more in the sign of the times. And I just haven't been able to deal with them all. But what I've hopefully done is presented enough for you to start thinking for yourself and to start researching for yourself. I just want to give you a little evidence of what's been left out. I haven't talked about the Pope as being regarded as the man of peace. Everybody thinks him as being the great moral figure and the hope of peace for the world. And this has been something which has been placed on every single Pope. Here is Pope Benedict saying, I too hope in this short reign to be a man of peace. But do you know what Scripture says? We haven't talked about this at all. But I'm just trying to point you in the right direction to do your own research. Look, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. This is talking about the little horn power, which is the Roman Catholic system. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and he shall prosper. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper. That means deception. In his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. How this works is this. I'll just briefly say, they're going to offer us peace and security. There's going to be so much turmoil in the world. There's going to be so many jihadis running around. And if they kill them all, they'll simply make some more. But they'll be running around and they'll be doing all sorts of terrible things. And everybody will be crying out, when is this going to happen? When is this going to stop? We want peace and we want peace, and then they're going to offer us peace with security. And look what what Scripture says when that happens. And when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them. And the reason that we cannot have peace and safety now is because this is a sinful world, and Scripture tells us that in a sinful world we will never have peace. It can only come when Christ comes, and he destroys all those who are the ones who are promoting the wars and the turmoil, and they will not accept Christ. And the rebellion has to come to an end, and it will come to an end, and then we will have peace. That's the only way we can have real peace. So to finish with, I want to remind you yet again with a special promise that God is in control. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. That's when we will have real peace, and we will have real love and security, and it will be a wonderful time, and it's going to be something that all of us have no idea what it's going to be like, but I do know it's going to be wonderful. It's been promised to us, and it's promised to all those who believe in Christ. So, my friends, this is a world that's going to eventually pass away. It's going to be destroyed because there's no hope for it. But there are tickets available for everybody who simply applies for them. And I would suggest that you apply for one, and it will be given to you. And I want to encourage you as we finish here to do your own research, study for yourselves, and I think you'll find that what I'm telling you here is true. I know it's painful, I know it's challenging, and I know it's not very easy to accept, especially for people who are involved with it. But if you screw up your courage and go forth in faith, you will find your way. God will lead you. And as you consider doing research and trying to find the truth of these matters, I would suggest you get this book and compare it to the Bible. It's a book that I've talked about before. It's a book which I honor very greatly. It's assisted me immensely in understanding these things. And please get in touch with us and order it. So it's been a pleasure presenting these things for you. Adieu. May God bless you on your journey, and may you allow the Son of God to set you free. God bless you. Amen.